Thank you, Eric, and the amazing panel for your insights. I think some of them are going to be at the happy hour tonight, so if you're interested in on-upper activities, you should definitely tap into their knowledge. For those that don't know me, my name is Brett Silcox. I'm the head of U.S. Government Relations for Astroscale U.S. and a board member of the Future Space Leaders. It's my great pleasure to introduce our first of two fireside chats with national security officials. Our first one's with Travis Langster, who is the Principal Director of Space Policy. Travis brings 20 plus years of commercial space experience working in the commercial field with space situation awareness, space domain awareness, and now DoD activities. He's a dad of 3 girls. He's also a former high school wrestler, and he also coached his daughter's high school wrestling team. Thank for his daughter for giving me that fun intel today. And the person grilling him will be Chris Beauregard, who has the longest title known to man. So bear with me. Space Policy Advisor supporting the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force. Oh, sorry. Got to overrun. For space acquisition and integration. And he's also a future Space Leaders Fellow in 2018. Chris brings to the table a great knowledge of both working in the commercial sector and in the U.S. government. Chris started as an intern in ULA a couple years ago, and in 2 years, he was the Director of Commercial Space Policy at the White House, working for the National Space Council. So you guys, you interns, you never know where you're going to end up in 2 years. So it's my great pleasure to introduce them and bring them to the stage.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Travis, it's a pleasure to share the stage with you today. I appreciate you spending your time with us. Realizing that we don't have too much of it, we'll get things started. So one of the first things that stood out to me, thank you, about the OSD policy portfolio is how broad it is. They seem to continuously shoehorn new subject matter in there. And I'm curious if you can help break it down for us. What is keeping you busiest, and how do you handle a portfolio of that size?
Okay, thanks. It's a great place to start, actually, but I do want to thank the Future Space Leaders and the Foundation for having me here, and this is an event that I've participated in my previous life, so certainly I want to continue supporting it. So with regards to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, it was actually mandated by Congress at the same time that the U.S. Space Force and U.S. Space Command was reinstituted. And it's a 4-star level equivalent, and the Assistant Secretary for Defense for Space Policy is Dr. John Plum. And in this office, we provide all space warfighting policy across Department of Defense. So, and we came in about a month apart, he being Senate confirmed and me being a political appointee. So the priorities that he's established for the office center around, we call it the 3 C's: space control, space classification, or the overclassification, and then space cooperation. So those are the 3 priorities. And if I spend a moment in each one of those, in terms of space cooperation, it really is about investing in our partners and allies. That means internationally, to ensure that we're working with them, that we're planning with them, and operating with them to deliver strategic advantage, to deter conflict, but also to prevail in case we do end up in conflict. So we spend a lot of time engaging in bilateral engagements as well as multilateral fora. So that's space cooperation. Space control, obviously, we are responsible for protecting and defending our national security interests, particularly as the threats in space continue to grow. So we ensure that we establish policies, but also ensure that we have the right apparatus in place to, again, deter conflict, but prevail. We are a military entity, so being prepared and postured to prevail. And then when it comes to space classification or the overclassification, we really are spending some time to ensure that at the end of the day, it's about providing capabilities to the joint servicemen that are out there, servicemen and women, protecting them. And if they can't be able to see the content of some activity because of the classification, that doesn't help anyone, as well as from a policy perspective, ensuring that certain authorities that are granted to the services and combatant commands are such that it empowers information sharing as well as foreign disclosure. So it covers being able to share information with our allies and partners, as well as with our commercial partners and across the joint force. So amongst those priorities, coming down towards the things that I actively get in, it gets into space situation awareness, space domain awareness, and commercial space.
Thank you. Yeah, so one of your pet rocks over the years in your previous life at AGI and Comstock and continuing now, one of your pet rocks has been transitioning space situational awareness to a more civil side of things, or at least civil SSA outside of a military function. Are you able to talk a bit more about that and what the next milestones coming up for you are?
Yes, that was pretty interesting, pretty surreal, coming from where you just stated what I was focused on. And then to have, it was actually the Vice President, the National Space Council, the full council were looking for an understanding of where the department was in that transition. And we announced that, I think it was September of last year, we had established a memorandum of agreement between Department of Defense and Department of Commerce to move out on the activity. We meet weekly on this transition. I just wrote a draft of one of the annexes. As a part of that memorandum agreement was to establish how the DoD and DOC would perform data transfer and what roles and responsibilities for each of the entities, Department of Commerce, Space Command, Space Force, and other activities. So just yesterday, I just reviewed the draft annex for the data transfer. There's some established guidelines and activities. I won't go too far in terms of milestones. That really is Rich Diabello and the Office of Space Commerce, but I know that we're marching towards activities that will ensure that they are standing up a successful transition, but also learning from the DoD experience. DoD is a military entity. There are lots of constraints placed on us. We're ensuring the Department of Commerce learns from our experiences, including the things that you don't want to do as they stand up.
Right. So do you see a role for industry in that process, and how does the ASD Space Policy Office, how do you all facilitate that conversation?
Yes, definitely a role for industry. By statute, the Department of Commerce is responsible for nurturing the space economy. And we are ensuring that Department of Commerce stands up to that, but at the end of the day, they also need to deliver a system that provides that safety of flight, not only for commercial and civil, but all those that operate in the domain, including NASA and the DoD and the international community. That said, it is very much, we design an end state, and that end state for Department of Commerce for this particular capability relies heavily on industry and commercial space. And you'll see a few engagements over the next few months that we're establishing. I have an activity that I'm working on with Rich Diabello, where actually I'll be filming a video that will introduce to industry in the coming weeks.
Appreciate that. It seems like space sustainability is a thread that's woven through all the priorities. Are you able to talk a bit more about why that's so important and what you see to be our goals for space sustainability in the coming years?
Yeah, I would broaden it beyond space sustainability to kind of responsible behaviors in space. Space sustainability, it's not unlike what it is here down on Earth in terms of keeping our environment, the air quality clean. We've seen a lot of challenges with that lately with various human activity. But we have the opportunity to ensure that the operational domain that we use for science, remote sensing, national security, space exploration, that we're able to use that resource for your generation and the generations to come. So that's obviously a foundational reason, but also to be able to operate in the domain, we need to do things that don't create additional hazards and or threats. So there was a space priorities framework that established some tenets of responsible behavior. U.S. Space Command, they set out on a tenets of responsible behavior, but it's what may seem like common sense activities, but over the 40, 50 years, we haven't, as a society, necessarily operated in that fashion. So one of them is to, when we launch satellites into orbit, don't create undue debris as that launch is taking place. As you're performing, as you're just operating in the domain, operate with due regard, just like we would do with airplanes for civil and commercial purposes. So there are tenets of responsibility that go along with space sustainability that the department is very much focused on.
When you transitioned from your previous role to your current role, I think you had spent about 25 years almost, not to age you, but 25 years working in the private sector. And were there any things that stood out particularly that helped you prepare for your current role? And are there any similarities and differences that you might want to outline between the two in terms of culture, expectations, anything like that?
Well, yes, certainly my private industry career certainly prepared me for this, though I wasn't expecting this assignment and role. Very humbled to have the opportunity to do so, to be in this position. It was experiences and skill sets that I had no idea that I would be leveraging. Some of those that come to mind is general management experience, organizational leadership and development. That's, I guess, one of the top skill sets that I'm actually leveraging that I did not expect. My background is aerospace engineering. Though I work in the Office of Space Policy, I have to turn off the left side of my brain and look through the policy lens, which is sometimes challenging, but exciting when I get to work with Department of Commerce on space traffic management because I can do both. I guess the other aspect is the work ethic. I work in the Pentagon, the policy teams, the folks in the Pentagon. The work ethic is they work really hard, long hours. And the other aspect, which is difference, there are certainly deadlines in private industry, didn't meet them, you had a bad quarter, a bad year. In this role, it's national level type pressure, deadlines. When I first came into the office, the office was working on a project that required the president to sign off on it. I recall getting a phone call one day that the vice president was going to brief the president on a particular matter, and we needed to read in on a particular clearance, and they were calling me to help make that happen. So it's just the national level of decision making and policy making is incredible on a daily basis. And I'll share with you, it was challenging the first few months, but every single day you just get used to that type of national level decision making. It's exciting, it's dynamic, but you have to kind of take a step back and understand what's going on. I will say it is also very rewarding as well.
Yep. Realizing that we're running a bit short on time, the last question that I'll ask, and I'll leave room for the audience to ask a few of their own. What advice would you give to young and mid-career professionals? What would SES Travis want to say to 20-something-year-old Travis?
I would say gain your experience, even if it's just one job or 10 jobs. Look for roles and responsibilities that may not be where you gained your academic experience. Work in areas that are outside of your comfort zone, outside of your knowledge area. That creates opportunities or forces you to build networks, build teams, collaborate with others, and continue that decision-making process. In my job today, there's policy decisions that are made. Some are delegated down to me from the assistant secretary. I lean on my decision-making skills for that. The other one is build your networks. not only at your peers, with your peers, but, seek a more seasoned professional that's been out there, and just get to, learn from them, understand what helped them get to where they are. I would also encourage you to diversify your network. Look for folks that don't look like you. Talk with folks that have different likes and interests. So a diversified team of collaborators as well.
Appreciate that. We'll open it up to the floor now. Do we have any questions for Travis? Got one in the back.
Can I get him this one?
Hello, Owen, intern at NASA, and I know the DoD has been enlisting the commercial sector in a lot of projects over the years in a variety of areas. I wanted to ask which of those you thought was most effective, and what areas would you like to see more cooperation in?
That was a little fast, but can you say the beginning again?
The DoD has been enlisting the commercial sector in a lot of different areas. Which of those do you think is most effective, and which areas would you like to see maybe more cooperation?
So we certainly do value commercial partnerships. I would say that there's a lot of room for improvement in being able to leverage commercial space, and I would go so as far as say integrate commercial space. So there's lots of room to grow, and I know Eric may talk to some of that from Colonel Felt may talk to some of that from what he's going to say, but there's a lot of SATCOM. We've been using commercial SATCOM for decades. There are what I would call areas where the commercial marketplace has advanced quite a bit. 15, 20 years ago, we wouldn't have thought of commercial providers providing space situation awareness, so that I think that's a very fertile area. Another potential area is just in space assembly and manufacturing. I thought I saw Diane Howard here earlier, but that's certainly an area to leverage in commercial. Obviously, we're leveraging and integrating. The way we get astronauts back to our space station is purely through commercial. So you will be seeing more activity and more information coming out later this fall on DoD's plans and intent to not only leverage commercial, but integrate commercial into our architectures and missions.
Got room for one more question. Got one in the back right.
It's okay, thank you. You're doing a great job so far. So, Bob Cabana was in here earlier, and he talked about one of his biggest concerns was making sure that we maintain United States leadership in space. And the status quo, is and for a while has been essentially, United States and their international partners as leaders in space. Russia has been a partner. China has essentially developed a program in isolation that now is very capable. What do you make of this? And is the status quo is it threatened? What are the threats? Is the U.S. neck and neck with China? Are they behind? What do you make of that?
Yeah, China has invested quite a bit in their space capabilities across civil and military. So they are a very, prominent adversary competitor, is how we would call it. And if you read our national defense strategy, China is the pacing threat. Russia is still out there, absolutely, but China is the pacing threat, and they're investing in space, and it's not only space, but it's their space-enabled capabilities to threaten our assets, and they're doing a lot of activities that, as you said, in isolation, not necessarily coming to the table, offering ideas and solutions to be more transparent. We're doing lots of activities in the UN where we've put a norm on the table. Actually, we committed to a norm to not conduct destructive anti-satellite missile testing. We've called on other nations to do so. There's at least more than a dozen nations who've also made the same commitment. And we also submitted a resolution to the UN that was passed, encouraging others to make the same commitment. It passed by 155 countries, voted for it. 9 or so didn't. You can guess which countries didn't, including Russia and China, and those that are like-minded. But we are in partnership with our colleagues from Department of State. We're working with them to push on these norms. And it's not about a capability. It is really about a behavior. So even though a country like Angola or Brazil may not have an anti-satellite capability, we want countries to commit to a particular behavior that is damaging for all of us that operate in the domain. But to your point, U.S. we're very much a leader in space across all domains, though we are certainly being challenged from a competitor perspective on the military and national security side.
Travis, thank you so much for your time and perspective. As a former fellow, it's people like you that really make this fellowship as valuable as it is. So please join me in thanking Travis Langster.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Travis and Chris, and appreciate the conversation. Also, Travis, appreciate this support, as you mentioned, for many years having you here. It's great to have you back. Next,